How's it going, YouTube? I'm your host, GP, and basically I wanted to get this video out as quickly as possible, but this is basically pertaining to Legends of Runeterra and all the new changes coming in patch, basically the point 0.9 patch. Alright, so let us get started on that. Alright, so as you can see, this is basically everything that's going to come down on the actual patch. That is Tuesday, February 18th. So, I want to kind of go over everything. Legends of Runeterra actually came out a video, but the video actually doesn't pertain to everything that actually happens in it. So I want to kind of go over everything, so then that way you guys could know the actual basics of what's changing and how it's actually changing for the better. So, as we go through the dev notes, they're basically talking about how their plans to actually change things for the future. They really want to have almost every card to be a viable card in at least a deck, and especially the champions. So to that end, they basically started buffing some cards. So we'll go off the first one. So they decided Lux. Lux herself wasn't using a lot of decks, and as they kind of give it an explanation, and then truthfully, Lux actually wasn't used a whole lot, nor was she stayed around a whole lot. So what they decided to do was actually buff her, give her a buff, basically a +1/+1 to her base and her level up form. So overall, she still comes out with barrier. And so because she still comes out with barrier, she actually has some survivability. So they kind of want to increase her so that she actually gains a little bit more survivability, which overall this is okay. I mean, maybe with the other changes that I'm about to talk about that she might be used more, but for the most part, it's just her card that actually she comes out with, it's all right. The problem is the fact that whenever you actually spend 6+ mana, you get the final spark. But you actually, to get the next final spark, you have to use that 6+ mana again. So it's not like you can constantly be able to keep getting final sparks. So it's a little bit difficult and situational, but the fact that she stays around a little bit longer, she might be usable. So we'll see how that goes in the future. They also buffed Yasuo. So Yasuo, okay, the way they buffed him was the fact that instead of his level up form, instead of 6+ units, it's 5+ units. So they decreased that by 1. So he can actually level up quicker. The problem with Yasuo is the fact that it's not necessarily his level up. The fact that it takes longer for him to level up is the fact that he has 3 health. Right now, with the fact that we're in for example, Shadow Isles has a lot of removal and a lot of other things like Get Excited from PNZ can just kill him outright. You almost need almost like a Fiora deck, where essentially you can protect him. But the fact is, Yasuo is the most important thing for a Yasuo deck. So you have to run 3. At least. I mean, at most, I should say. But the problem is, he only has 3 health. His 3 health is actually hurting him more than helping him. So he's actually easier to remove. So of course, if your Yasuo just dies in a Yasuo deck, that is it. Your deck is essentially useless. I mean, yeah, you can kind of hope that you draw another Yasuo, but it is a lot harder and a lot situational. So that's kind of the main reason why Yasuo decks aren't actually as prevalent. But I guess that's okay, because honestly, the stun feature, if Yasuo was very popular and the stun feature kind of makes you feel like you can't do anything, like you play units and then they're stunned and you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, I can't really do anything or answer anything. So Yasuo is kind of that middle ground that if they buffed him so much for Yasuo decks to be prevalent and OP, then it almost would be basically, it almost would be a card or a deck that would be hard to defeat, because you're just getting stunned all the time that you can't answer anything. So the change is a good change, but I don't know if it's going to be the major change. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Changed back to back. Back to back was 5, raised the cost to 6. with the fact that back to back, I mean, honestly, this is an okay change, but it's still going to be played. Back to back is a very important card. Gives plus three to two allies this round. Thankfully, it's this round and doesn't stay around forever. But because of so much swing that it does with the plus three, that it's still going to be played, whether it's 5 cost or 6 cost. You're more than likely still going to put in, especially for the Masia decks. So I think it's an okay change, but I don't think it's going to stop it from being played. Which is okay. I mean, it may diminish the fact that, hey, you have 3 in your deck, you might go down to 2. We'll see how it goes. Um, Reena Bal Caster, they changed him from 1 health to 2 health. So he wasn't really played a whole lot, but with the fact that he's in a Noxious deck and Noxious normally is aggro, then you won't feel as bad putting this in your deck with the fact that, he's going to buff everything else as well whenever you attack. So if you're running a Noxious deck and you're aggro, you're definitely going to be running this card as well. Earlier, with the fact that he had 1 health, he was so easily removed that it was kind of like, all right, I'm not going to put him in. It might be better to put another aggro card in. But with him being here, he's going to be an inclusion. So, hey, that's a good buff to Noxious. Another one to Noxious is going to be the Crimson Curator. So, I have a lot of different Vlad videos on YouTube. So if you guys haven't checked that out, definitely. They're pretty fun, pretty entertaining. So Crimson Curator, one problem I had with him was the fact that he had 2 health. So of course he had to stay alive in order for you to get more Crimson cards, which was a lot hard to do. It was very hard to do with the fact that with him only having 2 health, and then I damage it, he went down to 1 health. So he might pull me one more card. The fact that he has 3 health now is a great change, because even if I don't buff him, you don't buff him, or even if you don't damage him before anything happens, or even Vlad damaging him, he can trade well with some units. I mean, you got some 1 attack units, even some 2 attack units, and he'll still give you a card. So that's basically his 1 health increase is almost like I'm getting 1 more card that I can possibly get from him. So I'm actually thankful for this. And the one thing about Vlad decks are fun, but the problem, because they're not meta, is the fact that Vlad is hard. He's situational. With the fact that the Crimson cards and Vlad himself doing damage to everything, it's hard to kind of balance. All right, I'm damaging my units, and so is my opponent damaging my units. So it's hard to get the value with Vlad, but it's still fun in order to play it. So if they buff more of the Crimson cards, or even Vlad himself, then I still think that it's a viable deck and pretty fun to play. So I definitely will be playing Crimson Curator more in the Vlad decks, because I used to just run 1 because it was so situational. But with the fact that he has 3 health, probably add a lot, probably 2, maybe 3 in there. So then that way I can cycle my hand to get me more and more Crimson cards to be able to do more damage to my opponent. All right, so one of the biggest changes is deny. So they're going to change deny from 3 cost to 4 cost. So it's no longer going to be that, oh, as long as I just have 3 spell mana, I just cast deny. You have to at least have 1 more mana on top of it, which I think is an okay change. I mean, deny nowadays was having 3 in a deck was kind of too cumbersome. But now, when you're counting mana or counting your opponent's mana, the fact that, okay, it's no longer just, okay, do they have 3 of the spell mana, but do they have 4? So that big control cards like War Mothers and Freljord, it uses a lot of spells for removal and such. So getting denied a lot ends up being an issue for you, because you're like, all right, especially War Mothers is a 12 mana card. Getting that denied makes you hurt all the way inside. So I think this is actually a good change. So it's actually situational. If you're probably still going to run 2 deny, but you're going to have to be mindful of how much mana you have, and the determining factor that is you're going to be using 4 mana instead of the 3. So I'm actually okay with this change. I welcome it because it's going to be more flexible, and decks that actually wanted to use different spells can now use those spells because they're not worried as much as far as the deny coming. So we'll see how that goes. Inspiring Mentor. So they're changing Inspiring Mentor, where he's going to gain 1 more health. So instead of a 1/1, he's a 1/2. But the problem is they're changing it from, instead of him giving an ally in hand 1/1, he's giving it 1/0. This is actually what that 1 health change is huge, because now, for example, your elusive decks, or if you were buffing Zed or any other ones that you would constantly keep buffing, having more and more health on something actually makes it harder to remove. So because they're actually damaging one, you're buffing 1 damage onto your unit, then it's going to keep the same health cost. So I think this is actually a really good change. Buffing his health by 1, that's fine. It's okay. But the fact that he only buffs it by 1 attack it's great if you're it's great for everybody else. If you're the person that basically played a lot of elusives and you did a lot of inspiring mentors on it, then you were able to see your elusive units be out of range for any type of removal. So now those elusive units, it's basically a nerf to elusive as well. So, and actually it's pretty good with the fact that this guy's 1 cost, and the early game is actually more substantial, to where, for example, on Jewel Protector, you'll see they're moving it away from not necessarily from the early game, but the later game having a hand buff, and the fact that you have answers for it, that in itself helps you out a lot more. All right, so Jewel Protector, like I said, they buffed him from 3/3 to 4/4, so +1/+1, and he still has the same thing. So they're basically making it viable for Jewel Protector and the hand buff cards. Like it's saying here, they want to keep the hand buff viability, but they're making it to where it's kind of later in the game where hand buff is easier instead of just in the early game, which is fine because, like I said, by that time it's called being fair, and the fairness level is actually increased. So you won't feel like you're being blowed out by the early game where you can't do anything about it. But now, kind of the mid game, later game, if they do a hand buff, you might have some answers for it. You may have many followers and minions that be able to block whatever's coming out. So this guy technically wasn't being ran a whole lot earlier. I mean, he might be ran now because he's a little bit. I mean, you really, this card right here was seen a lot more in expedition mode. You might see it a little bit more in constructed, but for the most part, being the fact that hand buff's kind of into mid game to late game, we'll have to see if that's actually a viable change from it being in the early game. All right, so one elusive that was nerfed was Kinku Lifeblade. So instead of him having 3 health, he's down to 2 health, which the fairness level is actually really good on this, because now in the mirror, you can basically trade with each other and actually kill each other off. And the fact that he's elusive and he has life still, he's easier to remove with regular removal, or if you have elusive yourself to kind of block him. So any nerf to elusive, I think, is an okay nerf. The good thing is that Riot didn't bring basically the nerf hammer down into where basically he's not usable at all anymore. So overall, I think this is a good change, and I think it's a fair change, and I'm glad that they're changing a little thing, little by little, so then that way it's not a huge change, or then elusives is just not usable at all. All right, so coming into Shadow Isles, we got Commander Ledros. So they're changing him that his cost. He's going up to 9, but his damage is also going up to 9. So his power is up from 8 to 9. So they also changed the text to where it would say cut the enemy from the cut the enemy nexus health in half to basically they're adding at the end rounded up. Now it always did round up, so that's actually not a change. It's just more of a knowledge change because a lot of people may not have known that whenever he attacks the nexus, it always rounds up. So yes, if you have 1 health, it's going to round out to 1 and you die, which was always the case, but a lot of people didn't realize that was the case. So here they changed the cost up to 9. So with the fact that they changed the cost up to 9, they kind of give an explanation here, but essentially, the fact that whenever he dies, he comes back to your hand. So unless you want to pay 9 mana every turn, that's going to end up being slow. So he's going to end up being a detriment to you, unless he's your only card you have in hand and you have no choice. But it's actually a good thing that they raised his cost because, yes, in a control matchup, he's going to win. So, like, if you have control, let's say you're Freljord control, and I have Ledros, the longer the game goes out, I'm going to win because all I have to do is just cut your nexus in half each time, and then eventually you die. But now, even just a small change in cost from 8 to 9, if you have someone that's maybe mid-range, for example, they're going to end up playing more minions or more followers for that same 9 cost than you can't just keep paying 9, 9, 9 each time. You're going to lose. So I believe that's a good change. The only thing is, more than likely, you're still going to probably play 1 Ledros in your deck. I think it was rare that people would play 2, even at 8. So more than likely, you're still going to play him. But you got to really think about, after he dies and he comes back in your hand, is it really wise for me to play him again? Or is it better for me to play other followers, other champions, other things, so then that way I can kind of catch up? So I think this is a welcome change, and it's perfectly fine. And this is basically his skill that comes out. They added the little skill catchphrase so then people would know what moves can be answerable. So all they did was just added the rounded up part to the skill, same as the card. Raza, the change to Raza is basically from 7 cost to 8 costs. I still think that's a welcome change because Raza, it's okay as a card. Yeah, he kills 2. He's basically a 2-for-1, killing 2 enemies. The key is that you have to have already had a enemy or ally die this round. Now, granted, SI or Shadow Isles is able to kill your own units, so there's a way to do that, but yet still you had to have paid spell mana or some way in order to kind of bring his effect about. So he is still situational, and for him to do the 2-for-1, because he would be OP if this phrase was not in there. That basically, as soon as you played him, he will instantly kill 2 minions from your enemy. So, yet again, this is still a welcome change. It's fair. It's, the fact that you raise it for 1 cost is perfectly fine. Even keeping the fearsome tag. So we'll see how things go. But I believe these changes to them, because they were kind of problems, but they weren't like major problems to where they need to be nerfed into the stratosphere. But having the cost change from 1, I believe is fair. And we got to remember, this is still the beta. So they're still testing things out, still learning how this game works in an open setting. So, and as far as how long it's in beta, they haven't really said, but for right now, it's okay. And the fact that they're going to keep changing things while it's in beta, I'm actually thankful for Riot for doing that. Skullgeist essentially wasn't being played. So they're changing them. Basically, they're adding fearsome to them. So will Skullgeist be played in the future? I mean, He's best for like those spider token decks. So a lot of your spiders are dying, and then he comes out, and I think the fact that he's just a 5/5 is probably the one thing that's a detriment for him, because you have to have a lot of minions die for him to come out to be fair. And you got to understand fairness. So fairness is basically like, we want, even though you're trying to beat your opponent and your opponent's trying to beat you, you you know, it feels unfair if I played so many cards and you basically couldn't play anything. So you gotta make sure that there's a smart balance between fairness. Adding the fearsome to him, I guess, is okay. He wasn't played before. I don't know if he still be played. And the kind of same with Tortured Prodigy. So it's 5 costs. They raise the power, so they attack to 4. So it's a 4/4 instead of a 3/4. The key is that when an ally dies, refill your spell mana. So SI does have spells to answer things with. The key is I guess it's best said that there are other cards in SI that will get you towards your goal and the point of your deck than this one. You're not really going to put Tortured Prodigy in your deck and center it around him. Now you can. I'm sure there's people that experiment and such, and I'm sure there's going to be a deck where he's going to be good in the future. It's just right now with the spells that SI has, you don't necessarily need to have this in your deck to need the spell mana in order to play those spells. I mean, with Vile Feast and what's some other ones? Let's see here. Let's just go to spells. So Shadow Isles. So Black Spear, for example, is 2. Glimpse Beyond is 2. Vile Feast. Mark of the Isles is 1. So these cards are already pretty cheap. And those are some of the most popular spells. Now, some of the big ones like Vengeance and Ruination and such, I mean, those are high cost ones. So Tortured Prodigy, as you can see, is not, yeah, you refill your spell mana. Of course, you're getting 3. Now, don't get me wrong, that's great. For 1 unit to die, you gain 3 mana to use a spell. But with Shadow Isles, you almost don't necessarily need it. But like I said, that's where the key is. He will be used, I believe, in the future. Just right now, it's kind of like you don't necessarily need him to achieve your goal. Let's see. All right, going back. Wraithcaller. So Wraithcaller deck is one of the top decks right now. Or I'm sorry, Mist Wraith deck. I apologize. Wraithcaller is used for that. So they basically took away the fearsome tag to it, which I guess is okay, because the fact is you can't what they call chump block, which if you had, a lot of minions that were 1/1s, they kind of block. So then that way that saves you from dying. The fact that they took fearsome away from it at least gives you the chance to take 4 damage away from what would normally attack you and bring you down by 4. Because the fact is, they're already playing Mist Wraith and buffing Mist Wraith like crazy. So leaving the fearsome out of it, I think is fair. It's not. One thing about Riot, I will say, with all the changes that they've done, nothing seems super overpowered. Nothing kind of goes to the range of overpowered, and nothing kind of goes to the range of not viable. It's kind of still there in the middle. So they're doing a really great job of changing things. If you've had experience in playing Hearthstone, they nerf something. It's nerf to where you're never going to play that card again. So here's looking at you, Buzzard, and several other cards. Zombie Caller or something like that. But there's a lot of cards that that Blizzard did, that just like, it's nerfed, it's gone. Here, they're just dabbing a little bit on it. So I actually like the Riot's approach to it. Developers of Legends of Runeterra. All right, so they kind of give a little watch list here, as they're saying. They're looking at fearsome, and the fact that one thing about Legends of Runeterra is it's actually, I guess you could say, cool or fun that they have the element of blocking. And so the fact that, okay, someone declares their attack and you can use your minions to block. Well, if you have a whole squad of fearsome and you're sitting there like, I have stuff to block with, but I can't. So they're kind of looking at that to see if it's something that they may do away with or may not have a lot of cards that have that tag. So that's still good that they're actually looking at it. Um, so they're also going to look at control with the fact that, of course, how they've changed some cards. They want to make sure that control doesn't end up being super overpowered. Of course, they've changed some cards that would normally be in control, or they may change some card. They've already changed some cards that would be aggro and the tools to take care of control. They're taking a look to making sure, which is great, that they're not making it to where control cards, if you have answers to everything, that you automatically win, which is good. I'm glad that a company is actually looking at that. So then that way, if it ends up being an issue, they have no problems changing things. Kind of feels better. Like I said before, they've added the skills tag, so which some people already knew what the skills meant and what you can block, but they've added it so then that way it's easier for people to see. Some things about expeditions they're changing. They're changing some of the names. The Mossy Steel, for example, they feel that it's a little too strong. Um, the Battle Scars, they're swapping some units around, changing some units out, so expeditions will feel a little bit more fair. And some things that was having issues like Shroom and Bloom, which wasn't winning a whole lot, they're kind of adding some cards in. So in expeditions, you would feel like, all right, I don't have to just run Demacia or certain areas to get me that 7 wins. They're trying to make the balance even, so then that way doesn't necessarily any of these areas or tags you'll be able to kind of get to your 7-win goal. That's perfectly fine. So they're changing how XP works. For example, apparently that the end of trial, end of expeditions was the XP was way too much. So they're kind of rearranging how the XP rolls go, which is, it's fine. But they're also going to change the XP, how it works in regular wins. They're kind of smoothing it out so then that way, after so many plays in the game, like every time you win in the game, after so many wins, you wouldn't gain any more XP. So now they're kind of making it to where, okay, it's going to be a while before that happens, to the essence of that you're still going to get XP for a longer period of time and encourage you to play more. So then that way you're constantly getting XP instead of just playing 10 games and then it's like, okay, I'm done. So that's perfectly fine. So then that way, the more XP you get overall, the more cards you can get and easier to get cards. Changing the way XP works for friend challenges as well. That's perfectly fine. Added some changes to the frames, or you can actually go into options and change that now. They're also going to make it to where some actions are faster. So then that way you're not, a couple of seconds faster. So then the game is played and ran better. Also, they're going to change the way this UI works. So for example, when you have decks, instead of it kind of looking like this, it's going to be flipped around. So then that way you'll see the cost up here and then how many of that cost you have, which any UI changes is just a quality of life, which is always fun. Quality of life stuff is always a good thing, especially when they're wanting to make this game very popular for everyone to basically just play in general. Let's pull it up. All right. So kind of some patch sizes are being lower, friend challenge stability, some basically bug fixes. So some little things here and there. So for the most part, that's everything. Not a lot of changes, but actually, I believe some good changes. So I think the new patch 0.90 is actually going to come out well. And like I said, I just wanted to make this video so then that way you guys will kind of know a layman's terms how things work and kind of, done at a basic level. So that actually goes further than what this video shows and makes it easier for you guys. So anyway, signing off now. You guys take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. And like I said, have fun. And as always, delve deeper into any game you play. You end up having more fun. You guys have a nice night. Bye-bye now.